The Force binds all things across the galaxy, connecting every living being in an invisible web of energy and destiny. But what happens when something tears through that web from beyond something that runs on power the Force has never touched, carrying knowledge from a universe that shouldn't exist? The Jedi speak of balance and destiny. They never imagined that chaos could arrive in a shell of gold and red metal, screaming through the void between realities. The distortion appeared without warning in the Tingle Arm, far from the core worlds where the Clone Wars raged. Hyperspace rippled like disturbed water, and sensors across 3 sectors registered an impossible energy signature. Not hypermatter, not ion discharge, not anything in any Republic or Separatist database. Then came the object itself, a burning comet of twisted metal, trailing exotic radiation that made navigation computers scream warnings. It fell toward Hypori, a Separatist factory world of endless foundries and droid assembly lines. The Techno Union had transformed the planet into a mechanical nightmare of smokestacks and conveyor systems, where billions of battle droids rolled off production lines to feed the Separatist war machine. 3 moons hung in the rust-colored sky, and the air tasted of metal and chemical runoff. The thing, whatever it was, didn't slow. It punched through the upper atmosphere like a railgun slug, superheating the air around it. Automated defense platforms tracked its descent but held fire. It wasn't broadcasting Republic transponder codes, and its trajectory would take it into the uninhabited northern wastes anyway. Let it crash. Salvage teams could investigate the wreckage. It hit the ground 40 kilometers from the nearest foundry complex, impacting a canyon of red stone with enough force to register on seismic monitors across the continent. The impact crater glowed white-hot, and the twisted metal at its center sparked and hissed as coolant systems failed, and exotic energy bled into the barren ground. Inside the wreckage, barely visible through shattered armor plating, something moved. A hand, encased in red and gold metal, twitched, then fell still. Wat Tambor received the report within the hour. The Techno Union foreman stood in his climate-controlled command center, surrounded by holographic displays showing production quotas, droid deployment schedules, and resource allocations. His vocabulator clicked and whirred as he processed the data from the crash site. Unknown materials, unknown technology, energy readings that defied conventional analysis. The foreman's mechanical voice crackled with interest. Dispatch salvage team. Priority Alpha. Retrieve all wreckage. Secure the site. Within 2 hours, a Separatist salvage team descended on the crater with heavy lifters and analysis equipment. What they found defied explanation. The crashed object was clearly a vehicle of some kind, or perhaps armor. They couldn't tell, constructed from materials that weren't in any database. Alloys that shouldn't exist. An energy source at the center that pulsed weakly, contained in a circular housing that glowed with fading blue light. And inside, impossibly, a human. Male. Severe trauma. Burns across half his body. Barely alive, but alive. The team leader transmitted images back to Tambor's command center. The foreman studied the unconscious figure, the strange armor, the clearly advanced technology that had somehow survived a crash that should have vaporized anything organic. His mechanical mind calculated possibilities, probabilities, opportunities. Bring him to Medical Facility 7, Tambor ordered. All wreckage to Research Division. Sterilize the crash site. No records of this reached Separatist command. This is Techno Union property. The salvage team sealed the unconscious stranger in a stasis pod, loaded the shattered armor pieces onto cargo lifters, and erased all evidence of the crash. By nightfall, the canyon looked untouched, and the greatest prize the Techno Union had ever discovered was being rushed to their most secure facility. Wat Tambor stood before the medical bay's observation window, watching his technicians work. The stranger lay on a surgical platform, surrounded by medical droids and life support equipment. His injuries should have killed him: shrapnel wounds, radiation burns, massive internal trauma. The mysterious glowing device embedded in his chest was the only thing keeping him alive, and even that was failing, its light growing dimmer by the hour. But Tambor saw potential. The armor fragment showed engineering beyond anything in the galaxy. The power source was elegant, compact, impossibly efficient, and the human himself scanned showed an intellect off the charts. Neural pathways indicating genius-level cognitive function. "Save him," Tambor commanded. "Whatever it costs. Use our technology. Rebuild what's damaged. He's worth more alive than dead." The medical droids went to work. Cybernetic implants to repair shattered organs. Techno Union. Synthetic tissue to replace burned flesh. Stabilizers around that mysterious glowing device to keep it functioning. Hour after hour, they rebuilt him, piece by piece, mixing human and machine in ways that would have horrified the Republic's ethicists. Tony Stark floated in darkness, his last memories fragmented. Fighting something, Thanos? No. Something else. Dimensional energy tearing through space. Jarvis screaming warnings. The armor failing. Pain. Then nothing. But now, at the edge of that darkness, something pulled at him. A mechanical hum, voices speaking a language he didn't understand. The sensation of his body being taken apart and reassembled like one of his suits. He tried to reach for consciousness but couldn't quite grasp it, not yet. In the observation bay, Wat Tambor watched the stranger's vital signs stabilize. Soon, this unknown genius would wake. And when he did, the Techno Union would have questions. Many questions. And perhaps, if Tambor played this correctly, the Clone Wars would tilt decisively in the Separatists' favor. The first thing Tony became aware of was the smell, industrial lubricant, ozone, and something acrid that burned his nostrils. Not the familiar scent of his Malibu workshop or the sterilized air of the Avengers facility. This was different. Wrong. The second thing was the sound. Mechanical humming. Not Jarvis's smooth processors, but something cruder. More grinding. Hydraulics hissing. Metal scraping against metal. And voices strange. Modulated voices speaking in rhythmic clicks and bursts that his brain couldn't process into words. Tony's eyes snapped open. White light flooded his vision, and he jerked upward instinctively, only to find his arms restrained. Panic surged through him, captured, imprisoned. Thanos, but then his vision cleared, and he saw the restraints were medical, not hostile. Soft polymer straps across his chest and arms, easily breakable if he tried. He was lying on some kind of surgical platform in a vast chamber of dark metal and harsh lighting. Around him stood things. Robots? No. Too skeletal, too utilitarian. They looked like walking medical equipment, all spindly arms and sensor arrays, clustered around his bed like mechanical vultures. Jarvis? Tony's voice came out as a rasp. His throat felt like sandpaper. Jarvis. Status report. Silence. No friendly AI voice. No HUD display flickering to life. Nothing. Tony's hand went instinctively to his chest, and his fingers found metal. The arc reactor. Relief flooded through him. It was still there. Still glowing. Still keeping him alive. But something was wrong. The housing felt different. Heavier. And around it, he could feel connections. Wires. Implants running under his skin like roots. What the hell did you do to me? One of the mechanical things turned toward him, photoreceptors glowing red, and released a burst of binary that meant absolutely nothing. Then it reached for him with a surgical appendage, and Tony's instincts took over. He grabbed the machine's arm and twisted, rolling off the platform despite the restraint snapping. Alarms shrieked. The medical droids, because that's what they had to be converged on him. But Tony was already moving, stumbling, his legs weak but functional. He slammed one droid into another and made for the door, his mind racing. Where was he? Where was his armor? What happened to the team? The door hissed open before he reached it. A figure stood in the doorway, humanoid but clearly not human. Tall, skeletal, thin, with pale skin stretched over an elongated skull. It wore elaborate robes of deep purple and brass, and when it spoke, the voice emerged from a mechanical device at its throat, clicking and whirring before translating into words. Please, calm yourself. You are safe. Tony stopped, fists raised, taking in the alien before him. Behind it, he could see more figures, guards in dark armor, carrying weapons that looked like something from a sci-fi convention. Energy weapons? His engineer's mind cataloged automatically. Blasters. Safe? Tony's laugh was harsh. I wake up on a table surrounded by robot doctors with my chest cut open, and you tell me I'm safe? Try again. The alien tilted its head, and Tony realized the gesture was almost curious. You were dying. We saved you. You should be grateful. Grateful. Tony looked down at himself. For the first time, his chest was a mess of new scarring around the arc reactor. But worse were the implant cybernetic ports running along his ribs, down his arms. He could feel them inside him, foreign objects integrated with his biology. You turned me into a cyborg without asking. You were unconscious. Consent was impossible. The alternative was death. Tony's mind raced, forcing down the panic, focusing on what he knew. Unknown location. Unknown captors. His armor was gone. He could feel that absence like a missing limb, but the arc reactor still worked, which meant he still had power. And if he had power, he could work with that. Where am I? He demanded. Hypori, Techno Union Medical Facility. I am Wat Tambor, foreman of the Techno Union. The alien's vocabulator clicked with something that might have been pride. You are our guest. Guest. Right. Is that what you call prisoners here? You are not a prisoner. You are an opportunity. Wat Tambor stepped closer, and Tony tensed. But the alien merely gestured to the medical bay around them. You arrive from elsewhere. Your technology is unknown. Your biology shows you are human, yet you carry devices we cannot replicate. The energy source in your chest defies our understanding of physics. Tony's hand went protectively to the arc reactor. It's called intellectual property, and it's staying right here. Of course. Tambor's vocabulator made a sound that might have been a chuckle. We have no intention of removing it. In fact, we improved it. Your power source was failing when we found you. Radiation damage. Dimensional stress. Without our intervention, it would have gone critical within hours. Dimensional stress. The words triggered memories, the mission, the anomaly, Strange's warning about the instability, then the explosion of reality-tearing energy. Tony had been thrown into something, somewhere that shouldn't exist. And now he was. Where exactly is Hypori? Tony asked carefully. The Farah sector. Tingalarm. Outer Rim territories. Tambor recited the location as if it should mean something. It meant nothing. Tony had never heard of any of those places. Not in any astronomy database. Not in any shield briefing. Not anywhere. And Earth? How far to Earth? Silence. Tambor's photoreceptors brightened slightly. Earth? We have no record of such a planet in our databases. Where is this Earth? The floor seemed to drop out from under Tony's feet. They didn't know Earth. Didn't have it in their databases. He looked at the alien, the droids, the technology around him, all of it advanced but wrong, built on principles his mind recognized but couldn't quite place. What year is it? Tony heard himself ask. By the Galactic Standard Calendar, it is year 21 after the Battle of Yavin. Tambor paused. Though that battle has not yet occurred, we currently measure from the Rusan Reformation, year 979. None of those words meant anything. Tony's engineer mind, usually so quick to catalog and analyze, found no reference points. He was somewhere, somewhen, completely unknown. The Clone Wars rage across the galaxy, Tambor continued, watching Tony with those unblinking mechanical eyes. The Republic and Separatists fight for the future of civilization, and you, Anthony Stark, have arrived at a most opportune moment. How do you know my name? Your armor's databanks were quite informative, though encrypted beyond our current ability to fully decode. But your identification was clear enough. Tambor gestured, and a holographic display flickered to life, showing pieces of his armor twisted, burned, but recognizable. The Mark 50, his beautiful Mark 50, now scattered across some alien workshop like scrap metal. Tony's jaw tightened. That was his tech, his life's work. And these, whatever they were, had their hands all over it. I want my armor back, he said flatly. In time. First, we must discuss your situation. Tambor's vocabulator took on a different tone, almost businesslike. You are far from home if your home even exists in this reality. You have no allies, no resources, no understanding of this galaxy. You require our technology to survive." The alien gestured to Tony's chest. "Those implants are not merely cosmetic. They regulate your enhanced biology. They interface with your arc reactor. Without our continued maintenance, they will fail." The threat was clear, delivered with corporate efficiency. Tony felt rage building but forced it down. Getting angry wouldn't help. He needed information. He needed time. He needed to understand what he was dealing with. "So, what do you want?" Tony asked. "There's always a price." Wat Tambor's vocabulator clicked with unmistakable satisfaction. "Your genius, Mr. Stark. In exchange for your life, your continued survival, and eventual freedom. We want you to build for us." Tony stared at the alien foreman, his mind already racing through the implications. Build for them. The same words Raza had spoken in that cave in Afghanistan, a lifetime ago. The same trap. Different galaxy. Build what exactly? Tony kept his voice neutral, buying time to think. Wat Tambor gestured, and the holographic display shifted, showing massive factories, endless assembly lines producing skeletal robots by the thousands, battle droids, starfighters, weapons, systems. The Separatist Alliance fights for independence from a corrupt republic. We require superior technology to achieve victory. Separatist, Republic. Tony filed the terms away. So you're in a war, and you want me to be your weapons designer. How original. Mock if you wish, but consider your circumstances. Tambor's vocabulator maintained that unsettling calm. You are dependent on technology we control. Your cybernetic implants require specialized maintenance. The arc reactor in your chest, while functional, is unstable in this universe. We detected quantum fluctuations in its energy output, dangerous ones. Without our dampening fields, it could undergo catastrophic failure. Tony's hand went to his chest again, feeling the subtle vibration of the arc reactor. He'd noticed it felt different, slightly out of phase. Like a guitar string tuned wrong. Dimensional stress, Tambor had called it. That tracked his tech was designed for his universe's physical laws. Here, wherever here was, the rules might be different enough to matter. How long? Tony asked. Without treatment? 6 months. Perhaps less if you overtax the reactor. Tambor, let that sink in. With our assistance? Indefinitely. We have already made modifications to stabilize the quantum drift. But ongoing calibration is necessary. Tony's jaw clenched. They'd made him dependent, smart, ruthless. He could respect the strategy, even as he hated it. But respect didn't mean compliance. And if I refuse to build your weapons, then we provide minimal life support and attempt to reverse engineer your technology ourselves. You will die slowly while we extract what we can from your corpse. Tambor stated it without malice. Just corporate calculation. But that would be wasteful. Your mind is worth far more than your components. The medical bay doors opened again, and more figures entered, technicians in dark uniforms, carrying data pads and tools. They began working on the scattered pieces of Tony's armor in the corner, scanning and cataloging each component with professional efficiency. Tony watched them handle his tech and felt a surge of possessive fury. That was his. Every circuit, every nanoparticle, designed and refined through years of work. Seeing alien hands on it made his skin crawl. Remarkable engineering, one technician said in that same clicking. Translated voice. The armor appears to be composed of programmable matter, individual particles responding to neural commands. The power distribution system is unlike anything in our database, another added. It channels energy with near-perfect efficiency. Our best systems waste at least 12%. Tambor turned back to Tony. You see? Even damaged. Your technology fascinates our finest engineers. Imagine what you could create with our resources, our materials, our manufacturing capabilities. Tony forced himself to think past the anger. Okay, situation assessment. He was trapped in an unknown galaxy, dependent on his captors for survival, his armor destroyed, and Jarvis offline if the AI had even survived the dimensional transit. No Avengers, no Pepper, no way home that he could see. But he wasn't helpless. He never was. I want to see my armor, Tony said. All of it. Every piece you recovered. Of course. This way. Tambor led him through corridors of dark metal and harsh lighting. The facility was massive, industrial, built for function over form. Through windows, Tony could see the planet beyond red deserts, massive factories belching smoke into a rust-colored sky, 3 moons hanging in the atmosphere. Definitely not Earth. Definitely not anywhere he recognized. They passed other beings, more of those skeletal aliens, various other species Tony couldn't identify, and those skeletal robots moving with precise, mechanical purpose. Some of the organics stared at Tony with curiosity or suspicion. He was clearly an oddity here. The research lab was enormous. A cathedral of technology filled with workstations, holographic displays, and manufacturing equipment. And there, spread across multiple tables like a dissected corpse, was his Mark 50 armor. Tony approached slowly, his engineer's eye cataloging the damage. The dimensional transit had been brutal. Nanoparticles fused together by exotic energy. The housing unit cracked. Repulsor arrays melted. The neural interface fried. It would take months to repair, and that assumed he could even source the materials in this universe. But it wasn't impossible. Tony Stark didn't do impossible. I'll need a workshop, he said. Tools, materials, access to your manufacturing databases. Agreed. But understand, Mr. Stark, this facility is secure. You will be monitored. Any attempt to weaponize your technology against us will result in immediate termination of your life support. Tony turned to face Tambor, meeting those mechanical eyes with his own hard stare. Let me be clear about something. I don't build weapons for people who threaten me. I've been down that road before, and it didn't end well for them. Then what do you propose? I'll repair my armor. That's priority 1. I'm not walking around defenseless in whatever this place is. While I do that, I'll consult on your systems. Maybe improve efficiency, suggest design modifications. But I'm not building you a doomsday device, and I'm not creating anything that'll get people killed in your little war. Tambor was silent for a moment, his vocabulary clicking softly as he processed. Acceptable. For now. Prove your value, Mr. Stark, and we can discuss expanded cooperation. Disappoint us. He left the threat unspoken. Yeah, I got it. Perform or die. Very motivational. Tony turned back to his ruined armor, mind already working through repair sequences. I'll need a workshop assistant. Someone who understands your technology, can help me interface with local systems. I will assign an engineering team. Not a team. One person. I work better one-on-one. Tony had learned that much from his time with Rhodey, with Peter, with Bruce. Teams meant bureaucracy, oversight, interference. One assistant meant someone he could potentially convert to his side. Tambor considered. Very well. I will select someone suitable. Over the following hours, Tony was set up in a private workshop, still monitored, still locked down, but functional. The tools were different from what he was used to, but the principles were universal enough. Plasma welders instead of arc welders, molecular assemblers instead of 3D printers, holographic design interfaces instead of computer screens. His assigned assistant arrived that evening, a Skakoan technician named Rask, shorter than Tambor and less ornate, with a pressure suit that hissed and clicked. Rask was competent. Tony gave him that. Quick to understand instructions and familiar with the facility's systems. The energy readings from your arc reactor are anomalous, Rask observed, studying Tony's chest with professional curiosity. The quantum signature doesn't match anything native to this galaxy. That's because I'm not native to this galaxy, Tony replied, manipulating the holographic display to pull up schematics of the Mark 50's power distribution network. I'm from somewhere else. Somewhere your people have never heard of. Intergalactic travel? Rask's vocabulator registered something like all. That's theoretically possible but practically unachievable with our current hyperspace technology. Not intergalactic. Interdimensional. Tony watched Rask's photoreceptors brighten with fascination. Good. Curiosity was leverage. Your boss didn't mention that part? The foreman shares information on a need-to-know basis. Of course he does. Tony pulled up another schematic. this one showing the neural interface architecture. Half the circuits were burned out, but the core was intact. Tell me about this war you're fighting. Separatists versus Republic. What's that about? Rask hesitated, clearly weighing how much to reveal, then began to speak. Over the next hour, Tony learned about the Clone Wars, a galaxy-spanning conflict between a corporate alliance seeking independence and a democratic republic defended by warrior monks with laser swords. The Jedi, the Sith, the Force, some kind of mystical energy that Tony immediately categorized as physics I don't understand yet. It painted a picture of a galaxy in chaos, with the Techno Union sitting on the Separatist side, manufacturing endless droid armies to fight cloned soldiers. A war of production capacity as much as strategy. And the Jedi? Tony asked. These Force users, what are they like? Powerful. Dangerous. They serve the Republic as generals. Laser sword-wielding peacekeepers turned warriors. Rask's tone carried something that might have been resentment. They claim to bring order, but they enforce Republic corruption. Tony filed that away too. Every war had propaganda. Both sides claimed righteousness. The truth was usually somewhere in the middle, messy and complicated. As the workshop's lights dimmed for night cycle, Tony stood before his scattered armor, hands on his hips, mind already working through possibilities. Tambor thought he had Tony trapped. Dependent, controlled, but Tony Stark had built his first suit in a cave with a box of scraps. He'd faced down gods and aliens and his own demons. Whatever this galaxy thought it could throw at him, he'd find a way through. He just needed time. And time was something he could buy. One repair at a time. Rask, Tony said. Tomorrow, we start rebuilding. And I'm going to need detailed specifications on every material you have available in this facility. Of course, Mr. Stark. Tony smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Let Tambor think he was cooperating. Let them think they had him under control. He'd played this game before, and he'd learned how to win. 3 weeks passed in the workshop, and Tony fell into a rhythm that felt almost normal. Almost. If he ignored the alien assistant, the 3 moons in the wrong sky, and the cybernetic implants keeping him alive, he could almost pretend he was back in his Malibu lab. Almost. The workshop had become his territory. Walls covered in holographic schematics. Tables cluttered with components both familiar and alien. The Mark 50's nanoparticles were slowly being reconstructed, painstakingly reprogrammed to function in this universe's physics. It was delicate work, requiring him to fundamentally understand how energy behaved differently here. Rask proved surprisingly useful, translating Techno Union material science into terms Tony could work with. Durasteel instead of titanium alloys. Tabana gas for energy weapons instead of repulsor technology. Hypermatter for power generation that operated on principles that made Tony's physics degree weep. But Tony was adapting. He always did. The quantum fluctuation in your arc reactor has decreased by 18%, Rask observed, monitoring the readings from across the workshop. The dampening field adjustments are working. For now, Tony muttered, making microscopic adjustments to a cluster of nanoparticles under a magnification field. But I'm not staying dependent on external fields forever. I need to solve this at the source. The workshop door hissed open, and Wat Tambor entered with his usual mechanical precision. Tony didn't look up from his work. He'd learned the foreman visited every few days to monitor progress, and showing deference only encouraged the alien sense of control. Mr. Stark, progress report. Armor's at maybe 30% functionality. Neural interface is still fried. Power distribution network needs complete overhaul, and half the nanoparticle clusters are irreparably damaged. Tony finally looked up, wiping his hands on a cloth. I told you this would take time. Time is a luxury, Mr. Stark. The Republic grows bolder. They recently captured one of our droid foundries on Mandalorian. We need technological advantages, not rehabilitation projects. Tony set down his tools, turning to face Tambor fully. Then you should have found someone else to kidnap. I'm rebuilding my armor, not designing your next generation of murder bots. Perhaps it is time to reconsider that position. Tambor's vocabulary took on a harder edge. You have been here 23 standard days. You have consumed resources, medical support, materials. You have given us nothing in return. I gave you my expert opinion on your manufacturing processes, told you how to improve droid response times by 16%, showed your engineers how to optimize power flow in your walker designs. Consultation, not creation. Tambor moved closer, and Tony noticed for the first time that 2 security droids had entered behind him, armed with those blaster rifles. The Techno Union expects return on investment, Mr. Stark, and you are becoming expensive. Tony's hand drifted unconsciously to his chest, feeling the arc reactor's pulse. The threat was implicit but clear. Stop being useful. Stop living. What exactly do you want me to build? Tambor activated a holographic display, and Tony found himself looking at schematics for a massive quadrupedal walker 30 meters tall, bristling with weapons, armored like a tank. The OG-9 homing spider droid, current model, effective against infantry, vulnerable to concentrated fire and Jedi intervention. The display shifted, showing combat footage, one of those spider droids being torn apart by someone in brown robes moving impossibly fast, deflecting blaster bolts with a glowing sword. A Jedi. Tony watched with professional interest as the warrior literally cut through the droid's armored legs with that laser sword. You want me to make it Jedi-proof? Tony said. I want you to make it unstoppable. Tambor's photoreceptors gleamed. Your armor withstood dimensional transit. Your arc reactor generates power with impossible efficiency. Apply those principles to our combat platforms. Tony studied the schematics, his engineer's mind automatically cataloging weaknesses. The spider droid was impressive in a brutal, industrial way, but it was designed with quantity over quality, mass production over innovation. Every joint was a vulnerability. The power distribution was inefficient. The targeting systems were primitive compared to Jarvis's combat protocols. He could make it better. Significantly better. And that was the problem. Give me 48 hours, Tony heard himself say. I'll review your specs, run some simulations, see what's possible. Tambor's vocabulator made that clicking sound that might have been satisfaction. Excellent. I knew you would see reason, Mr. Stark. After the foreman left with his security detail, Rask turned to Tony with what might have been concern. You are actually going to build weapons for them? I'm going to design something, Tony replied carefully, pulling up the spider droid schematics and beginning to annotate them. Whether it's what Tambor wants is another question. Over the next 2 days, Tony threw himself into the project with manic intensity. He mapped every system, every circuit, every weakness in the spider droid design. Rask helped him access Techno Union databases, pulling combat data from hundreds of engagements. Tony watched footage of the Clone Wars with growing unease. This wasn't the clean, strategic warfare he'd studied at MIT. This was brutal, galaxy-spanning carnage. Clone soldiers bred for war, droids programmed for slaughter, Jedi cutting through both with those laser swords. Entire planets burning, and somewhere in his workshop, he was designing something that would add to that carnage. The Jedi are the problem, Rask explained, highlighting combat footage where a single robed warrior had destroyed an entire droid battalion. They move faster than targeting systems can track. They deflect our blaster fire. They tear through armor with their lightsabers as if it were paper. Lightsabers, Tony repeated, watching one of those glowing blades shear through durasteel. What's the physics on those? Plasma contained in a force field generated by a kyber crystal. The blade is essentially superheated matter held in a stable form by exotic energy. So basically a contained sun in sword form. Great. Tony made notes. And these Jedi, they're all enhanced? They channel the force. It gives them precognition, enhanced reflexes, telekinesis, and various other abilities. They can sense danger before it occurs, which makes conventional targeting nearly useless. Precognition. That complicated things significantly. Tony had designed the Mark 50 to handle enhanced opponents, Thanos, Hulk, Thor, but those were threats he could analyze, predict. How do you fight someone who could see your moves before you made them? You didn't fight fair. That's how. Tony pulled up a blank schematic and began to sketch. Not a spider droid redesign. Something else. something that had been forming in the back of his mind since he'd watched that Jedi footage. "What are you designing?" Rask asked, peering at the evolving hologram. "An idea." Tony's hands moved rapidly through the holographic interface, building from scratch. "Tambor wants something that can handle Jedi. Fine. But I'm not giving him another dumb walker for some warrior monk to slice in half." The design took shape, sleeker than the spider droid, more compact, with integrated systems that borrowed heavily from his Iron Man armor. A single pilot combat suit, rather than a massive walker. Enhanced mobility. Redundant systems. Layered defenses. "A powered exoskeleton," Rask observed. "For organic pilots? For anyone who wants a fighting chance against someone with a laser sword and precognition." Tony refined the design, adding features that would never appear in Tambor's final report. Hidden failsafes. Override codes. Remote shutdown capabilities. If he was going to build something for these people, he was going to maintain control over it. 2 days later, Tony presented his work to Wat Tambor in the command center. The foreman studied the holographic schematic with his unblinking mechanical gaze, while Tony explained the concept. A single pilot system rather than autonomous droid? Tambor's vocabulary carried skepticism. That limits mass production. It also gives you adaptability. Droids are predictable. They run programs. A skilled pilot in this suit could match a Jedi's creativity, adapt to their tactics in real time. Tony manipulated the display, showing theoretical combat scenarios. Plus, you don't need 1,000 of these. You need maybe a dozen, deployed strategically. The cost would be substantial. Less than replacing spider droids every time a Jedi shows up. Tony highlighted the power systems. "And I've integrated some of my arc reactor principles here. Not a full arc reactor, I'm keeping that proprietary, but enough to give you triple the operational time of your current combat platforms." Tambor was silent, processing. Tony could almost see the calculations running behind those photoreceptors. Cost versus benefit. Strategic advantage versus production limitations. Return on investment. "Build me a prototype," Tambor finally said. "You have 6 weeks. If it performs as promised, we will discuss full production. If it fails." The foreman let the threat hang in the air. "It won't fail," Tony said with more confidence than he felt. After Tambor left, Rask turned to Tony with something that might have been admiration. "You bought yourself more time. Time I'm going to use to finish repairing my armor," Tony replied, pulling up his private schematics, the real ones, not the ones he'd shown Tambor. "Because the moment this prototype is done, I'm getting out of here. One way or another." Rask's photoreceptors dimmed slightly. "Escape is impossible. The facility is secured. The planet is under Separatist control. Where would you go?" Tony smiled grimly. "I'll figure something out. I always do." The prototype consumed the next month of Tony's life. He worked 18-hour days, falling into the focus mania that Pepper used to warn him about. But Pepper wasn't here. Nobody from his old life was here. Just alien technicians, hostile overseers, and the constant hum of factories producing weapons for a war he didn't understand. The combat suit took shape in the center of his workshop, a skeletal frame of durasteel and composite armor plating, roughly humanoid but bulkier. Standing 3 meters tall, it wasn't elegant like his Iron Man armor. It was utilitarian, brutal, designed for one purpose: surviving combat against opponents who could see the future and cut through metal with laser swords. Tony called it the Hammerhead. Tambor's people called it Project Vendetta. "The servo motors are responding well to the neural interface," Rask reported, running diagnostics on the prototype's limb articulation. "Response time is 0.3 seconds from thought to action. That's faster than any piloted system in our database." "Still too slow for someone with precognition," Tony muttered, adjusting the feedback algorithms. "But it's the best we can do with local tech." The real work was happening beneath the surface. While Tony ostensibly built Tambor's anti-Jedi weapon, he'd been quietly repairing his own armor in the background. Components salvaged from the Mark 50, integrated with Separatist technology out of necessity. It was Frankenstein's monster of engineering, part Earth tech, part alien innovation, but it was becoming functional. And more importantly, it was becoming his ticket out. "Mr. Stark, there's something you should see." Rask pulled up a holographic newsfeed, and Tony's attention snapped to the display. The footage showed a Republic Star Destroyer in orbit over some industrial world, deploying gunships and clone troopers. The attack was methodical, overwhelming, and leading the assault, clearly visible in the footage, was someone in brown and tan robes moving through a droid battalion like a force of nature. A Jedi. Tony watched the warrior deflect blaster bolts with casual precision, the lightsaber moving in arcs of blue light. Droids fell in pieces. Battle tanks exploded. The Jedi wasn't just fighting, they were dominating, making it look effortless. That's Obi-Wan Kenobi, Rask explained, one of the Republic's most celebrated Jedi generals. He's led dozens of successful campaigns against Separatist installations. And he's heading where? Unknown. But Republic intelligence has been probing Hypori's defenses for the past week. There are concerns they've learned about certain projects. Tony's stomach dropped. They know about me. The foreman believes they have intelligence suggesting a new weapon is being developed here. They don't know specifics, but Rask's vocabulator clicked nervously. If they raid this facility, they'll find you and your technology. How long do we have? Days. Maybe a week if we're fortunate. Tony turned back to the hammerhead prototype, his mind racing. The suit wasn't ready. His own armor was maybe 60% functional, and if a Republic strike team hit this facility, he'd be caught in the middle of a firefight between clones and droids, with Jedi tearing through both. He needed to accelerate everything. Rask, I need you to do something for me. Off the books. The technician's photoreceptors brightened with what might have been alarm. The foreman monitors all. I know what Tambor monitors. This is different. Tony pulled up a schematic he'd been working on in secret, hidden beneath layers of encryption in the workshop systems. I need these components, quietly. Can you source them without alerting oversight? Rask studied the list, his vocabulator clicking as he processed. These are parts for your personal armor. Yes. If I'm caught, you won't be. You're good at your job, Rask. Better than Tambor gives you credit for. Tony met the alien's gaze steadily. Look, when this facility gets hit, and it will get hit, you want me armed and functional. Because right now, I'm the most advanced piece of military hardware in this building. And if I'm operational, your chances of survival go up significantly. It was manipulation, pure and simple. But it was also true. Rask was silent for a long moment, then his vocabulator clicked softly. I will acquire what I can. But Mr. Stark, when you leave, what happens to those of us who helped you? The question hung in the air, heavy with implication. Tony had been so focused on his own escape that he hadn't considered the collateral damage. Rask, the other technicians who'd assisted him, they'd be implicated just by proximity. Come with me, Tony said suddenly. When I leave, you come too. Where would we go? The Separatist Alliance would hunt me as a traitor. The Republic would execute me as a Separatist collaborator. Then we find somewhere neither side controls. This galaxy has to have neutral territory, right? Smugglers, independent systems, somewhere we can disappear. Rask's photoreceptors dimmed, and Tony couldn't tell if it was fear or consideration. I will think about it. But first, let us ensure there is a win for this escape of yours. Over the next 72 hours, Tony worked with desperate intensity. The Hammerhead prototype reached operational status barely. It could walk, fight, survive combat, not at the level Tony wanted, but Tambor was growing impatient, and the Republic threat loomed larger each day. Rask delivered the components Tony needed, smuggled in through cleverly falsified requisition orders. Tony integrated them into his rebuilt armor in secret, working through the night cycles when oversight was minimal. The new armor was different from the Mark 50, heavier, incorporating durasteel plating over the nanoparticle foundation. The arc reactor had been modified to operate with local power standards, reducing the quantum fluctuation that had threatened him. The repulsors were hybrid systems, part Earth tech, part adapted Separatist energy weapons. It wasn't perfect, but it would fly. It would fight. It would get him out. The demonstration day arrived with martial efficiency. Wat Tambor, several Techno Union executives, and a contingent of security droids gathered in the facility's testing arena, a massive hangar converted for combat trials. The Hammerhead stood at the arena's center, powered down, waiting. Tony stood beside it in his workshop clothes, trying to look confident rather than exhausted. "Foreman," Tony began, "the Hammerhead prototype is ready for field testing. It incorporates enhanced mobility, redundant systems, and multi-layered defenses designed specifically to counter Jedi combat tactics." "Demonstrate," Tambor commanded. Tony signaled to Rask, who activated the prototype remotely. The Hammerhead powered up with a deep hum, servos engaging, armor plating locking into combat configuration. Its photoreceptors glowed amber as the combat AI initialized. "For this test, I'll be piloting remotely," Tony explained, taking position at a control station. "Full neural interface piloting will require training, but basic combat functions can be automated." The arena's far wall opened, and combat droids entered. B-1 battle droids in formation, armed with blaster rifles. Standard targets. Tony engaged the Hammerhead systems, and the suit moved with surprising grace for its bulk. It crossed the arena in loping strides, adaptive servos adjusting to terrain in real time. The droids opened fire, blaster bolts striking the Hammerhead's armor and dissipating against the energy shielding. The Hammerhead's arm cannons deployed, releasing concentrated bursts that tore through the droids with brutal efficiency. But Tony wasn't showing off firepower. Tambor had plenty of that. He was showing adaptability. The Hammerhead dodged, weaved, used cover that shouldn't have been necessary for its armor rating. It moved like it was fighting an opponent who could predict its actions, constantly varying its patterns, creating randomness that precognition couldn't easily counter. Within 90 seconds, the droids were scrap. "Acceptable against droid targets," Tambor observed. "But Jedi are not droids." "No, they're not." Which is why the Hammerhead's real advantage isn't firepower, it's unpredictability. The combat AI incorporates randomization algorithms that prevent pattern recognition, and in the hands of a skilled pilot who can adapt in real time, it becomes exponentially more effective. Tony triggered the next phase. The arena's holoprojectors activated, creating a simulated Jedi opponent moving with inhuman speed, deflecting simulated blaster fire. The Hammerhead engaged, and Tony pushed the prototype to its limits. The suit performed well, Tony had to admit. Not perfectly, the servos were a fraction too slow, the shields flickered under sustained fire simulation, but well enough to prove the concept. Tambor conferred with his executives in clicking, modulated speech. Tony couldn't understand the words, but he recognized the body language. They were impressed, but calculating cost-benefit ratios, production feasibility, strategic deployment. Finally, Tambor turned back to Tony. "Begin production planning for a limited run. 20 units. If they perform in actual combat." The facility's alarm system shrieked to life, drowning out whatever Tambor was about to say. Red emergency lighting flooded the arena. Through the hangar's viewports, Tony saw the sky fill with Republic gunships descending through the atmosphere, flanked by starfighters. "Facility breach," a voice crackled over the intercom. "Republic forces inbound. All defensive positions activate." Tambor's photoreceptors blazed. "Secure the prototype. Mr. Stark, get to the safe room." No. Tony was already moving toward the Hammerhead, climbing into the pilot harness. "If the Republic wants a fight, let's give them one. Consider this your combat test, Foreman. You are not trained for—" "I built the damn thing. I know how it works better than anyone." Tony locked himself into the neural interface, feeling the suit's systems connect with the cybernetic ports in his body. Pain flared, then settled into a background hum as man and machine synchronized. The Hammerhead systems came fully online, and Tony felt its power like an extension of his own body. It was clunky compared to the seamless integration of his Iron Man armor, but it was functional, and more importantly, it would keep him alive until he could reach his real armor. Through the Hammerhead's external sensors, Tony watched the Republic gunships touch down on the facility's landing platforms. Clones in white armor deployed in disciplined formation, blasters ready, and at their center, unmistakable in his tan and brown robes, was the Jedi from the footage. Obi-Wan Kenobi, Tony's hands tightened on the controls. First contact with the Republic. First encounter with a Jedi. This was about to get very interesting. Rask, Tony transmitted on a private channel. Get to my workshop. Prepare my armor for immediate deployment. And be ready to run. Understood, Mr. Stark. Tony piloted the Hammerhead toward the hangar exit, toward the sound of blaster fire and the chaos of war. Time to see how his engineering held up against someone who could see the future. Time to see if Tony Stark could survive the Clone Wars. The Hammerhead burst through the hangar doors into absolute chaos. The facility's outer courtyard had become a war zone, clone troopers advancing in disciplined formation, battle droids streaming from assembly bays, blaster fire crisscrossing in brilliant streaks of red and blue. Explosions rocked the Duracrete as Republic gunships provided aerial support, their cannons tearing into droid positions. Tony's tactical display lit up with targets, dozens of them, friend and foe intermixed in a way that made his targeting computer scream warnings. He'd seen urban warfare footage, trained with SHIELD on combat scenarios. But this was different. This was industrial-scale carnage. All Separatist forces, defensive perimeter. Tambor's voice crackled over the comms. Protect the research facilities at all costs. Tony spotted the Jedi immediately impossible not to. Obi-Wan Kenobi moved through the battlefield like water flowing around stones, his blue lightsaber a blur of light. Blaster bolts that should have hit him were deflected with casual precision, sent back toward their origins. Droids fell in smoking heaps. The Jedi didn't even look like he was trying. Okay, Tony muttered. That's going to be a problem. A squad of clone troopers spotted the Hammerhead and immediately shifted fire. Blaster bolts hammered against the prototype's shields, and Tony felt the impact through the neural interface, not pain exactly, but pressure, like someone pushing against his skin. He returned fire with the Hammerhead's wrist-mounted cannons, deliberately aiming high. The clones scattered, seeking cover. Tony wasn't here to kill Republic soldiers. He was here to survive long enough to reach his real armor and get the hell off this planet. Unknown combatant in the heavy armor. An authoritative voice cut through the comm channels, probably the clone commander. Identify yourself or be engaged with lethal force. Tony considered his options. Announcing he was an unwilling prisoner of the Separatists might buy him sympathy, but it would also paint a target on him the size of a gunship. Better to stay mysterious. He didn't respond, instead using the Hammerhead's enhanced mobility to move toward the research wing where his workshop was located. The suit handled better in actual combat than in testing, the adaptive servos learning from each movement, refining their responses. A Republic LAAT gunship swung around, its ball turrets tracking the Hammerhead. Tony's threat assessment system screamed warnings a split second before the turrets opened fire. He threw the Hammerhead into a rolling dodge that shouldn't have been possible for something that size. Feeling the neural interface translate his intentions into mechanical action with only minimal lag, the gunship's fire chewed up the ground where he'd been standing. Tony came up from the roll, targeting systems, locking onto the gunship's vulnerable underbelly, finger hovering over the trigger, and stopped. Those were Republic pilots. They were attacking what they thought was a Separatist weapon. They were just doing their job, fighting what they believed was a just war. Tony had spent enough time listening to Rask's propaganda to know the Separatists weren't innocent, but he'd also heard enough to know the Republic was corrupt, failing, turning Jedi into soldiers and breeding humans specifically for war. Neither side deserved his help. Tony redirected his fire, hitting the gunship's repulsor arrays with precise shots that disabled rather than destroyed. The craft lurched, losing altitude but landing hard rather than crashing catastrophically. The crew would survive. They'd be angry, but they'd survive. Rask, status? Tony transmitted while moving toward the research wing. Republic forces have breached the outer perimeter. Your armor is prepped and ready. But Mr. Stark, there are clone troopers between you and the workshop. At least 2 squads, possibly more. I'll handle it. Just keep the path to the landing platforms clear. Tony rounded a corner and came face to face with a full clone squad in defensive positions. Their DC-15 blasters swung toward him immediately, and their commander, distinguished by blue markings on his armor, raised a hand. Stand down or we open fire. Through the Hammerhead's external speakers, Tony replied, I don't suppose I'm not actually with these guys would work as a defense? The commander's helmet tilted slightly. You're piloting Separatist technology on a Separatist facility. Technically, I'm piloting my technology that they forced me to build while holding me prisoner. Big difference. Sir, one of the troopers said, that's not a standard Separatist design. Armor configuration is unknown. Could be a prototype. The commander seemed to consider this, but before he could respond, a section of wall exploded inward. Battle droids poured through the breach. B-2 super battle droids, heavier and more dangerous than the standard B-1S. Their wrist rockets and rapid-fire blasters turned the corridor into a kill zone. The clones immediately shifted fire to the new threat, and Tony found himself in the awkward position of sharing a battlefield with people who'd been trying to kill him seconds earlier. The droids, with their typical lack of tactical awareness, fired on everything that moved clones, Hammerhead, even each other when they got in the way. Suggestions? Tony asked the clone commander while using the Hammerhead's bulk as mobile cover for the squad. Don't die? The commander's dry response was almost funny. Tony targeted the lead super battle droid, hitting it with a concentrated burst that overwhelmed its shields and turned its torso into molten slag. The clones used the opening, their coordinated fire taking down 2 more droids. They were good, Tony had to admit. Trained to perfection, moving like parts of a single organism. It was also deeply unsettling that they'd been bred for this. Fall back to the junction, the commander ordered. His men moved in perfect formation, providing covering fire while repositioning. Tony followed, the Hammerhead sensors picking up more droid signatures converging on their position. They reached a wider corridor with better sightlines, and the clone commander's helmet turned toward Tony. You said you're a prisoner? Was a prisoner. Currently reconsidering my employment options. Tony checked his tactical display. The workshop was 2 corridors away, but Republic forces were pushing deeper into the facility. Time was running out. Then you're coming with us. Republic custody, protective detention, until we sort out. Yeah, that's not happening. Tony brought the Hammerhead's weapons online again, not targeting the clones but making his position clear. I appreciate the offer, really, but I've had my fill of being someone's asset. I'm leaving. You can either shoot me or let me go. The standoff lasted maybe 3 seconds before it was interrupted by something that made Tony's threat assessment system lose its mind. The temperature in the corridor dropped. The air itself seemed to press down with sudden weight, and then Obi-Wan Kenobi was simply there, stepping out of a side corridor with his lightsaber ignited, the blue blade casting dancing shadows. The Jedi looked at the Hammerhead, then at the clone commander, his expression calm but his eyes sharp. Commander Cody. Report. Sir, unknown combatant in prototype armor. Claims he's a prisoner of the Separatists. Assisted us against droid forces but refuses Republic custody. Obi-Wan's gaze returned to the Hammerhead, and Tony felt the weight of that stare even through the armor's sensors. It was like being examined by something that could see past metal and circuits into whatever lay beneath. Interesting, the Jedi said softly. You don't feel like a droid. You don't feel like most organics either. There's something unusual about you. I get that a lot, Tony replied through the external speakers. Look, Jedi Obi-Wan, right? I'm not your enemy. I'm not the Separatist's ally. I'm just trying to get off this rock in one piece. So how about we all agree I was never here and I'll be on my way? I'm afraid it's not that simple. Obi-Wan's lightsaber remained active, though not in a threatening position. Yet, that armor represents significant tactical intelligence. We can't allow Separatist technology to. It's not Separatist technology. Tony's frustration bled into his voice. It's my technology, built with local materials because mine were destroyed. I'm from Earth, not any planet in your database, not any system you've charted. I was dimensionally displaced here and taken prisoner by the Techno Union. They rebuilt me, forced me to work for them, and now I'm leaving. That's the whole story. Obi-Wan's expression shifted slightly surprise, maybe, or disbelief. Dimensionally displaced? That's quite a claim. Yeah, well, I've got the interdimensional travel scars to prove it. Check my energy signature. It won't match anything in this galaxy because it's not from this galaxy." The Jedi was silent, and Tony could almost see him reaching out with whatever mystical force sense they had. Obi-Wan's eyes widened fractionally. "He's telling the truth," Obi-Wan said to Cody. "Or at least, he believes he is. There's something genuinely foreign about his presence. It's dissonant with the Force." "Does that mean I can go?" Tony asked. Before Obi-Wan could answer, the facility's ceiling exploded. A Separatist transport ship, an armed freighter by the look of it, dropped through the breach, its turrets already firing. Clone troopers scattered, and Obi-Wan moved with inhuman speed to deflect the incoming fire. But the ship wasn't targeting the Republic forces. It was targeting the Hammerhead. "Mr. Stark," Wat Tambur's voice crackled over a direct channel. "Did you truly think you could escape with our technology? You are Techno Union property, and property does not leave without permission." Tony cursed and ran, the Hammerhead servos screaming as he pushed the prototype to maximum speed. The transport ship pursued, its weapons tearing up the corridor behind him. Obi-Wan and his clones were forced to take cover as the Separatist ship turned the facility into a demolition zone. "Rask," Tony transmitted. "Change of plans. I need my armor now." "Already on it, Mr. Stark. Workshop door is open, but there are Separatist security droids. I'll handle them." Tony crashed through the workshop entrance, the Hammerhead's bulk barely fitting through the reinforced doorway. His real armor stood on its deployment rack, the hybrid Earth-Separatist technology gleaming under the emergency lighting. It looked like nothing else in the galaxy, sleeker than the Hammerhead, more elegant, but with an edge of alien technology that made it uniquely his. Rask was there, along with 3 other technicians Tony had worked with. They all stared at him with a mixture of fear and hope. "Are you truly leaving?" Rask asked. "Yes, and you're coming with me, all of you." Tony began extracting himself from the Hammerhead's pilot harness. "Anyone who wants out of this nightmare, follow me. We move in 30 seconds. He didn't wait for their answer. Tony practically fell out of the Hammerhead and ran to his armor, letting it wrap around him like a second skin. The neural interface connected instantly, the cybernetic ports in his body synchronizing with the suit's systems. Power flowed through the arc reactor, repulsors hummed to life, and for the first time since arriving in this galaxy, Tony Stark felt like himself. "Jarvis," he said hopefully. Silence. The AI hadn't survived the dimensional transit. Tony pushed down the grief he'd mourn later and focused on the HUD coming online. All systems showed green, or close enough to green. "Okay," Tony said, his voice now filtered through the armor systems. "Time to show this galaxy what Earth technology can really do." Tony's armor felt right in a way nothing had since he'd arrived in this galaxy. The weight, the power, the seamless integration between man and machine, this was who he was. Not a prisoner, not a reluctant weapons designer, Iron Man. "Rask, you and your people get to the landing platforms. Find a ship. Steal one if you have to. I'll cover you. Mr. Stark, the Separatist forces are about to have a very bad day." Tony's repulsors flared to life, lifting him off the workshop floor. The sensation was incredible after weeks of being grounded. "Go. Now." The technicians fled toward the emergency exits while Tony blasted through the workshop's exterior wall, bypassing the corridors entirely. He emerged into the chaos of the courtyard battle, his armor's sensors immediately cataloging threats: Republic gunships, clone troopers, battle droids, and that Separatist transport ship circling back for another attack run. The transport's turrets tracked him, and Tony felt a familiar rush of combat adrenaline. This, he understood. This, he was trained for. He dodged the incoming fire with practiced ease, the armor's flight systems responding to his thoughts with minimal lag despite the hybrid technology. Tony returned fire with wrist-mounted repulsors. The blasts were different here, adapted to work with Separatist power systems. But the effect was the same. The transport's starboard turret exploded in a shower of sparks. "Attention all Separatist forces," Wat Tambur's voice echoed across the facility's speakers. "The prototype and its creator are to be captured alive. Disable, do not destroy. He is too valuable to lose." Valuable, Tony muttered. I'm touched. Really? A squad of droidecas rolled into position below him, their shield generators flaring to life before they opened fire with twin blaster cannons. Tony barrel-rolled through the air, coming around behind them and hitting them with concentrated repulsor blasts that overloaded their shields from the rear. The droids collapsed, smoking, but more were coming. Always more. And the Republic forces were pushing deeper into the facility, which meant he was rapidly running out of space to maneuver. Mr. Stark. Rask's voice crackled over the comm. We've reached the landing platforms, but all ships are locked down. We can't launch without override codes. Of course they are. Tony changed trajectory, angling toward the platforms while his HUD tracked incoming fire from 3 different directions. Send me the ship's access port. I'll hack it remotely. That would require. I built an arc reactor in a cave with a box of scraps. I can crack Separatist encryption in my sleep. Tony's fingers flew across the holographic interface projected inside his helmet. The armor systems interfacing with the facility's network. Separatist security protocols were actually impressive, multi-layered, adaptive, designed to prevent exactly this kind of intrusion. But they weren't designed by Tony Stark. He found the back doors almost immediately, the places where efficiency had been prioritized over security, where bureaucratic oversight had created vulnerabilities. Within 40 seconds, he had access. Within 90, he'd overridden the landing platform's lockdown. You're clear, get aboard and prep for launch. A Republic gunship swung into his path, and Tony barely avoided collision. Through the viewport, he could see the clone pilot's helmet turn toward him. Weapons systems tracking. They were fast, well-trained, and clearly saw him as hostile. Tony made a split-second decision. He opened a direct comm channel to the gunship's frequency. Republic forces, this is the pilot of the unknown armor. I'm not Separatist. I'm leaving this facility with several rescued prisoners. Request safe passage to orbital space. Negative, unknown contact. The response was immediate and professional. You will land immediately and submit to Republic custody for questioning. Can't do that. But I'm not your enemy. Check with your Jedi Obi-Wan. He'll confirm I'm not with the Separatists. There was a pause, probably comm chatter with Kenobi's unit. Tony used the time to dodge fire from ground-based droids and make progress toward the landing platforms. He could see Rask and the technicians boarding a light freighter, nothing fancy, but it would get them off-planet. Unknown contact. General Kenobi confirms your story is unusual, but you're still operating Separatist technology in an active combat zone. We cannot allow. The transmission cut off as something massive moved through the battlefield. Tony's sensors screamed warnings as the presence registered not just on his technological systems, but on something deeper. Something that made his cybernetic implants tingle with wrongness. A second ship descended through the smoke and fire, sleek and dangerous, painted in dark colors. And standing on its deployment ramp, red lightsaber ignited, was a figure in black robes. Oh, you've got to be kidding me, Tony breathed. There are evil Jedi too? The figure leaped from the ship, an impossible jump that covered 50 meters and landed in the center of the battlefield with a shockwave of force that sent clones and droids flying. The red lightsaber moved in precise arcs, cutting down anything in reach with brutal efficiency. That's Count Dooku, Rask transmitted, his vocabulary tight with fear. Sith Lord, leader of the Separatist movement. Mr. Stark, we need to leave now. Tony didn't need to be told twice. He gunned his repulsors toward the landing platform, but Dooku's ship moved to intercept. Turrets opened fire, and Tony was forced into evasive maneuvers that ate up precious seconds. Below, Obi-Wan Kenobi had engaged Dooku directly. The two lightsabers, blue and red, clashed in a display that looked more like a dance than a fight. They moved impossibly fast, the Force clearly augmenting their speed and perception beyond human limits. Tony's tactical mind cataloged everything he was seeing. These weren't just skilled warriors. They were operating on a completely different level, one where physics bent around them, where cause and effect became suggestions rather than rules. And Count Dooku had noticed him. The Sith Lord disengaged from Obi-Wan with a force push that sent the Jedi tumbling backward. Then Dooku turned his attention skyward, toward Tony. and his hand extended. Tony felt it before it hit a pressure in the air. A sensation like the universe reaching out to grab him. Then an invisible force slammed into his armor like a freight train. Systems screaming warnings as he was yanked downward out of the sky. He hit the ground hard, servos absorbing most of the impact but leaving him momentarily stunned. When he looked up, Count Dooku was walking toward him with the unhurried confidence of someone who knew they'd already won. "Fascinating," Dooku said, his voice cultured and refined. "Wat Tambor's mysterious prisoner. I had heard rumors of a new weapon, but you're something quite different, aren't you?" Tony scrambled to his feet, repulsors charging. "Let me guess. You're here to collect me like everyone else? Take a number. Get in line." Dooku's red blade hummed through the air, close enough for Tony to feel the heat. "I sense no connection to the Force in you, yet you possess technology beyond anything in this galaxy. The Techno Union was foolish to think they could keep such a prize to themselves. Nobody keeps me. I'm not property." Tony fired his repulsors at point-blank range. Dooku simply raised his free hand, and the energy dissipated against an invisible barrier. "The Force," Tony's mind supplied. "He's using the Force as a shield." "Crude," Dooku observed, "but intriguing. Tell me, stranger, where do you truly come from? Somewhere your philosophy doesn't reach." Tony shot back, launching a spread of micro-missiles from his shoulder mounts. These, Dooku couldn't simply deflect. He had to move. Force-enhanced speed carrying him aside as the missiles detonated behind him. But it bought Tony the seconds he needed to get airborne again. "Mr. Stark," Rask's voice was desperate. "The freighter's ready. We're at the platform." Tony angled toward the landing pad, but Dooku's ship moved to block his path. And now Republic gunships were converging too, both sides apparently deciding he was too valuable or too dangerous to escape. He was out of time and running out of options. Then inspiration struck, the kind of desperate, probably stupid inspiration that had saved his life more times than he could count. "Rask, slave your ship's controls to my frequency. I'm going to do something incredibly ill-advised." "What are you?" Tony didn't wait for the protest. He opened fire on both the Separatist ship and the nearest Republic gunship, not to destroy, but to disable. Precision shots that knocked out propulsion systems sent both craft into controlled descents that would leave them grounded but intact. Then he transmitted on an open channel to all forces. "Attention everyone trying to kill or capture me. You've got bigger problems than one guy in fancy armor. In approximately 90 seconds, the Hammerhead prototype in that workshop is going to overload. I may have left its power core in a slightly unstable configuration. When it goes, it'll take out half this facility." It was a complete bluff. The Hammerhead was perfectly stable, but they didn't know that. "You're bluffing." Wat Tambor's voice crackled. "Am I? You know my work. Foreman, you know I build in fail-safes. Did you really think I'd create a weapon without ensuring I could destroy it if necessary?" Tony could almost hear the calculations running through Tambor's mechanical brain. The risk versus reward. The cost of losing the facility versus the cost of letting him escape. "All Separatist forces fall back to minimum safe distance," Tambor finally ordered. "Secure the research wing." Obi-Wan's voice cut across the Republic channels. "Republic forces disengage and evacuate to safe distance. Confirm civilian personnel are clear." It was working. Both sides were pulling back, prioritizing damage control over capturing him. Tony didn't waste the opening. He hit maximum thrust, the hybrid repulsors screaming as he accelerated toward the landing platform where Rask waited. Get in," Tony transmitted, landing beside the freighter with a clang of metal on Duracrete. The technicians were already aboard. Rask stood at the ramp, and through his armor sensors, Tony could see the Skakoan's photoreceptors brightening relief. Maybe, or surprised that Tony had actually come for them. "Mr. Stark, the Hammerhead is fine. Completely stable." I lied. Tony ran up the ramp as the freighter's engines engaged. "Welcome to freedom, everyone. Now let's get the hell out of here before they realize I was bluffing." The ramp sealed, and the freighter lifted off, its shields activating just in time to absorb blaster fire from droids that hadn't gotten the retreat order. Tony took position at the cockpit, his armor interfacing with the ship's systems. "Do you know how to pilot this?" Rask asked. "I've flown a spaceship exactly 0 times in this galaxy. How hard can it be?" The answer, it turned out, was extremely hard. But Tony was a fast learner. The freighter, which Rask identified as a modified YV-666 light freighter called the Rusted Comet, bucked and shuddered as Tony wrestled it through Hypori's atmosphere. The controls were completely alien, the flight characteristics nothing like the intuitive responsiveness of his armor, and the ship handled like a flying brick with the aerodynamics of a particularly stubborn asteroid. "Pull up on the yoke," Rask shouted from the co-pilot's seat, his vocabulary clicking frantically. "You're coming in too steep. I know what I'm doing." Tony definitely didn't know what he was doing. He hauled back on the controls, and the freighter's nose lifted just enough to avoid clipping a communications tower. Behind them, the facility's automated defenses were coming online. Turbo laser batteries tracking their ascent. Shields at 60%. One of the technicians called from the engineering station. "We won't survive sustained fire." Tony pushed the throttle forward, or what he hoped was the throttle, and the freighter surged upward with a metallic groan. The first turbolaser blast passed close enough to make the shields flare brilliant blue. The second hit dead on, and the ship rocked violently. Shields at 40%. "I'm open to suggestions," Tony snapped, his hands flying across the control panel. The interface was slowly making sense. This readout was engine power. That one was shield distribution. Those controls managed the hyperdrive. It was similar enough to piloting his armor that his brain could extrapolate. "There," Rask pointed at the viewport. "The hyperspace vector is clear. We need to jump before Republic or Separatist ships intercept." Tony found what he hoped was the hyperdrive activation sequence and started inputting commands. The navicomputer spat back something in an alien script that he couldn't read, but the tone seemed angry. "It says we don't have a destination plotted," Rask translated. "You can't just jump to hyperspace randomly. You'll fly through a star or, fine, give me coordinates. Anywhere that's not here." Rask's fingers moved across his station's controls, plotting a course to Ord Mantell. It's neutral territory mostly, controlled by smugglers and crime syndicates. Neither Republic nor Separatist jurisdiction. Perfect. Criminals I can work with. Better than warrior monks and corporate tyrants. Tony engaged the hyperdrive the moment the coordinates locked in. The stars stretched into lines, and reality folded in a way that made Tony's engineer brain scream. The arc reactor in his chest suddenly felt wrong, its quantum signature clashing with whatever physics made hyperspace possible. Pain flared through his cybernetic implants, and he gasped. "Mr. Stark?" Rask's photoreceptors brightened with concern. "I'm fine." Tony gritted his teeth against the dissonance. "Just. Hyperspace doesn't agree with Earth technology." "How long is this trip?" "Approximately 16 standard hours at our current speed." 16 hours of feeling like his insides were vibrating at the wrong frequency. "Fantastic." Tony disengaged his armor's helmet, letting it retract so he could breathe real air. The workshop had been climate controlled, but the freighter's atmosphere was stale, recycled, tasting of metal and desperation. The 4 technicians who'd escaped with them, all Skakoans like Rask, stood uncertainly in the cramped cockpit, staring at Tony like he was either a savior or a particularly dangerous unknown variable. "So," Tony said, leaning back in the pilot's chair and trying to ignore the quantum dissonance, "anyone want to tell me what we're actually flying into? What's Ord Mantell like?" Rask's vocabulary clicked thoughtfully. "Lawless. Dangerous. It's a haven for bounty hunters, smugglers, and those avoiding Imperial, excuse me, Republic attention. The planet has no formal government. Only gang territories and corporate enclaves. If you have credits, you can disappear there. Credits being money, I assume? Currency, yes. Which we don't have." Rask gestured around the stripped-down freighter interior. "This ship was scheduled for decommission. It has no cargo, minimal supplies, and its hyperdrive is operating at perhaps 70% efficiency." Tony rubbed his face, feeling stubble and exhaustion. He'd been running on adrenaline for hours, and now that he wasn't actively being shot at, the crash was hitting hard. "Okay, so we're flying a rust bucket to a criminal planet with no money and no plan. Great. This is just like that time I woke up in a terrorist cave." except with more aliens. One of the technicians, younger than Rask, with less ornate pressure suit markings, spoke up hesitantly. "Mr. Stark, why did you come back for us? You could have escaped alone." Tony looked at the young Skakoan, seeing genuine confusion in those photoreceptors. "Because you helped me. Because Tambor would have killed you for it. And because..." He paused, thinking of Yinsen in that cave so long ago, the man who'd sacrificed everything so Tony could escape. "Because I don't leave people behind anymore. Not if I can help it." The technicians exchanged glances, their vocabulators clicking in a language Tony didn't understand. Then Rask spoke. "We owe you a life debt, Mr. Stark. Among our people, this is not taken lightly. I don't want a debt, I want partners. Crew, whatever you want to call it." Tony gestured around the cockpit. "We're all fugitives now. Both the Republic and Separatists will want us, me for my technology, you for helping me escape. We need to stick together." "To what end?" Rask asked. "You wish to return to your Earth. We have no way to accomplish that. The technology to traverse dimensions is beyond even the most advanced civilizations in this galaxy." Tony was silent for a moment, the weight of that truth settling on him. Earth, the Avengers, Pepper, his entire world, possibly beyond reach forever. The thought was crushing, but he forced it down. He'd spent his entire life solving impossible problems. This was just another one. "Then we survive," Tony said finally. "We find a way to make this work. And maybe, eventually, we find someone who knows something about dimensional physics. This galaxy has to have its scientists, its innovators. Someone who can point me toward answers." "The Jedi," one of the technicians suggested. "They command the Force. They can do things that defy physics." "The Jedi wanted to put me in protective custody, which is just prison with better PR." Tony shook his head. "But you might be onto something. The Force, whatever it is, clearly operates outside standard physics. Maybe someone who understands it could help me understand what happened to me." Rask's photoreceptors dimmed. "The Jedi serve the Republic. Approaching them would mean surrender." "Not the Jedi then. What about the other ones?" "That guy with the red laser sword. Count Dooku. He called himself Sith." The temperature in the cockpit seemed to drop. All four technicians went very still, their vocabulators silent. "The Sith are not to be trifled with, Mr. Stark," Rask said carefully. "They are everything the Jedi claim to oppose: passion instead of peace, power instead of restraint. Count Dooku is one of the most dangerous beings in the galaxy. He would not help you. He would use you, twist you, and discard you when you cease to be useful. So, exactly like every other faction I've met so far." Tony's laugh was bitter. "Look, I'm not saying I trust the guy, but he seemed interested in me. Interested means leverage. And right now, leverage is something I desperately need." "You're considering approaching the Separatists again, after we just escaped?" "Not the Techno Union, not Tambor, but maybe Dooku himself. He's the leader, right? Maybe he'd be willing to make a deal that doesn't involve me being someone's prisoner." "That's insane," one of the younger technicians said. "Probably," Tony agreed, "but I've built a career on insane ideas that somehow work out. Usually, most of the time. Sometimes." Before Rask could respond, the freighter's proximity alarm shrieked. Tony's hands flew to the controls, pulling up the sensor display. 3 ships had just dropped out of hyperspace behind them, sleek, dangerous-looking craft with aggressive weapon profiles. Bounty hunters. Rask identified them immediately. "Someone put a price on us already." "That was fast. We've been in hyperspace for less than an hour." Tony studied the pursuing ships. They were faster than the rusted comet, closing the gap steadily. "How much of a price are we talking?" Rask interfaced with the ship's communications array, intercepting the bounty hunter's transmission. His photoreceptors brightened with alarm. 100,000 credits. 50,000 for you alive, Mr. Stark. The rest for the ship and any Separatist defectors aboard. Someone wants me back badly. Tony's mind raced. The freighter couldn't outrun them, couldn't outgun them, which meant he needed to get creative. How long until we can drop out of hyperspace? Not until we reach Ord Mantell. Premature exit could tear the ship apart. So we fight. In hyperspace. Has anyone ever fought in hyperspace before? It's considered suicide. Ships in hyperspace exist in a different dimensional state. Weapons fire can cause catastrophic reality breaches. Tony grinned, the expression sharp and dangerous. Good thing I'm not from this reality then. Rask, get to the gunnery station. Everyone else, strap in. We're about to test some theories about interdimensional physics. Mr. Stark, this is madness. Yeah, I get that a lot. Now move. Tony activated his armor's helmet, the HUD interfacing with the freighter's systems. The bounty hunter ships were closing fast, their weapons charging. Through the bizarre tunnel vision of hyperspace, they looked like predatory fish swimming through an ocean of stars. The arc reactor in his chest pulsed, its quantum unstable energy resonating with the hyperspace field. Tony felt that dissonance again, but this time, he didn't fight it. Instead, he channeled it through his armor's systems, routing power to the freighter's shields in a way that shouldn't work according to this galaxy's physics. The shields flared with energy that looked wrong blue-white instead of the standard blue, rippling with patterns that hurt to look at. The bounty hunters opened fire, laser bolts streaking through hyperspace in defiance of sanity. The impacts hit the shields and scattered, diffracted. The quantum instability of Tony's arc reactor was making the shields behave like a prism, splitting the energy into harmless wavelengths. That's impossible, Rask breathed. Shield geometry doesn't work like that. It does now. Tony's hands danced across the controls. Return fire. Let's see if this works both ways. Rask opened fire with the freighter's single dorsal turret, and the bolts that emerged were the same wrong-colored energy. They hit the lead bounty hunter ship and tore through its shields like they weren't even there. The quantum unstable energy completely bypassing conventional defenses. The bounty hunter ship's engines exploded, and the craft tumbled out of hyperspace in a violent exit that probably killed everyone aboard. The two remaining hunters immediately broke off, their pilots clearly deciding that whatever bounty was being offered wasn't worth dealing with technology that violated every law of physics they knew. Tony watched them vanish into the hyperspace tunnel, his heart pounding. That had worked. It shouldn't have, but it had. Mr. Stark, Rask said quietly. What you just did, that's not possible in this galaxy. Then it's a good thing I brought some impossible with me. Tony deactivated his helmet, leaning back in the pilot's chair. His chest ached, the arc reactor burning hot from the power draw. Rask, I think I just figured out how we're going to survive in this galaxy. We have something nobody else does. Technology that doesn't play by the rules. That will make us targets. We're already targets. Tony smiled grimly. But now we're targets that can bite back. The rest of the hyperspace journey was quiet, each of them lost in their own thoughts. Tony used the time to run diagnostics on his armor, to think about next steps, to plan. Ord Mantell would be temporary. He needed resources, information, allies. He needed to understand this galaxy well enough to find his way home. Or, if home was truly impossible, to carve out a place where he could survive. When the rusted comet finally dropped out of hyperspace above Ord Mantell, a planet of rust-red oceans and industrial cities, Tony felt something he hadn't felt since arriving in this galaxy. Hope. Dangerous, probably foolish hope, but hope nonetheless. Ord Mantell was exactly as advertised, a grimy jewel of crime and commerce hanging in space like a warning to anyone who valued law and order. From orbit, Tony could see the sprawling cities clustered around industrial zones. The patchwork of territories marked by different lighting schemes and architectural styles. No unified government meant no unified aesthetic, just chaos given physical form. Landing clearance requires a docking fee. Rask reported from the communications console. 300 credits. Which we don't have, Tony reminded him, so we're not landing officially. Find me somewhere on the outskirts. Industrial district, maybe a scrapyard. Somewhere we can set down without attracting attention. Rask manipulated the sensor array, scanning the surface. There. Sector 17. Mostly abandoned factories and salvage operations. Minimal security presence. Perfect. Taking us down. The descent through Ord Mantell's atmosphere was rougher than Tony would have liked. The freighter's damaged shields protesting every meter. They passed over cities that looked like they'd been built, destroyed, and rebuilt a dozen times, each layer of civilization leaving its scar. The architecture was a chaotic mix. Republic-era buildings next to Separatist factories, next to structures that predated both. Tony brought the rusted Comet down in what had once been a loading yard for a manufacturing complex. Rusted machinery littered the area like mechanical corpses, and the few buildings still standing looked ready to collapse. It was perfect, isolated, anonymous, and exactly the kind of place where a stolen Separatist freighter wouldn't raise immediate alarms. The landing was harder than Tony intended, the freighter's landing gear groaning in protest as they settled onto cracked duracrete. When the engines finally powered down, the sudden silence was almost deafening. "So," Tony said, standing and feeling every hour of stress in his muscles. "Welcome to our new home. It's not Malibu, but it has a certain post-apocalyptic charm." The technicians looked around the cramped freighter interior with varying degrees of apprehension. They'd spent their lives in the clean, climate-controlled facilities of the Techno Union. This was culture shock writ large. "What now?" the youngest technician asked. "We have no credits, no contacts, and both the Republic and Separatists want us captured or killed. Now we adapt." Tony moved to the cargo bay, his armor sensors scanning the surrounding area for threats. "First priority is security, make sure nobody knows we're here. Second is resources, we need food, power, materials. Third is information, I want to know everything about this planet, its power structure, and who might be willing to trade with fugitives." "That's a considerable list for people with no currency," Rask observed. Tony smiled, the expression sharp and calculating. "Who said anything about currency? We have something better. We have technology that just made 2 bounty hunters run away in terror. That's valuable. We just need to find the right buyer." Over the next several hours, they secured the rusted Comet as best they could and began exploring their immediate surroundings. The abandoned industrial sector was a graveyard of failed enterprises, factories that had produced everything from droid components to processed food, all shut down when the war made their products obsolete or unprofitable. But there were signs of life. Squatters in some buildings, a small market operating out of a converted warehouse, and everywhere, the infrastructure of a planet that functioned despite having no functional government power conduits, water distribution, communications, networks. Someone was maintaining all this, which meant someone was in charge, even if unofficially. Tony's armor drew stares. Even in a place like Ord Mantell, where exotic technology wasn't uncommon, his hybrid Earth Separatist design stood out. People gave him a wide berth, which suited Tony fine. He wasn't here to make friends. They found what passed for a cantina in Sector 17, a prefabricated structure that served drinks of questionable origin to clientele of questionable legality. Tony left his helmet retracted but kept his weapon systems armed as they entered. The conversations didn't exactly stop when they walked in, but they definitely quieted. Every eye in the place assessed them potential threats, potential marks, potential entertainment. Tony had been in enough dive bars across Earth to recognize the dynamics. He approached the bar, where a Rodian with scarred green skin was serving drinks. "Information," Tony said directly. "I need to know who runs things in this sector." The Rodian's multifaceted eyes studied Tony for a long moment, then flicked to Rask and the other Skakoans. "Depends what you mean by runs things. We got the Mantellian Separatist movement in the Northern Territories. The Exchange controls most of the trade routes. And then there's the Bounty Hunters Guild, which answers to nobody but themselves. What about independent operators? People who work outside those structures?" "You're looking at one." A voice spoke from behind them, and Tony turned to see a woman leaning against a booth human, maybe mid-30s, with a kind of casual confidence that suggested she could handle herself in a fight. She wore mismatched armor pieces and carried at least 3 visible weapons. "Name's Kira Sindel. I broker deals between people who don't want official connections. For a fee. I'm not interested in fees right now. I'm interested in survival." Kira's eyes flicked over Tony's armor, lingering on the arc reactor visible through his open chest plate. "That's custom work. Not Separatist, not Republic. You're the one who escaped Hypori." Tony tensed, hand moving toward his repulsor controls. News travels fast. Bounty was posted 6 hours ago. 100,000 credits. The Techno Union is very unhappy with you. Kira pushed off from the booth and approached, her posture relaxed, but her hand near her blaster. Question is, are you worth that bounty? That depends. Are you a bounty hunter? I'm whatever pays best. Kira smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. But right now, I'm thinking you might be worth more as a client than a bounty. Anyone who can steal Separatist technology and fight their way off. Hypori is either crazy, competent, or both. That's valuable. Tony studied her, his armor sensors reading micro-expressions, heart rate, stress indicators. She was telling the truth mostly. Opportunistic? Definitely, but not immediately hostile. What's your offer? Tony asked. I get you established here. Fake IDs. A place to work. Connections to suppliers who don't ask questions. In exchange, you build me something. Something that gives me an edge in my business. I'm not building weapons for random criminals. Not weapons. Well, not just weapons. Kira gestured around the cantina. Ord Mantell runs on technology, old technology. Breaking down technology. Someone who can repair, upgrade, innovate. That's worth more than 100,000 credits in the long run. Tony exchanged glances with Rask, who gave a subtle nod. It wasn't ideal, but it was a start. 40-60 split, Tony countered. You provide resources and connections. I provide the technical work. Profits get split 40% to you, 60 to us. Non-negotiable. Kira laughed. You've got nerve. 50-50, 40-60. And I throw in upgrades to whatever ship you're flying. Your choice: better engines, better shields, or better weapon systems. One-time offer. That made Kira pause. She studied Tony with new appreciation. You can actually deliver on that? I built an arc reactor that works in a dimension it wasn't designed for. I made a freighter's shields behave like quantum prisms in hyperspace. Your ship? That'll be easy. Deal. Kira extended her hand, and Tony shook it, armor glove to bare skin. Welcome to Ord Mantell, Mr. Stark. Try not to blow up anything important. Over the following days, Kira proved surprisingly competent. She secured them a workshop in an abandoned factory, complete with power hookups and basic tools. She connected them with suppliers who sold salvage components and raw materials with no questions asked. She even arranged for fake identification codes that would keep casual scans from immediately flagging them as wanted fugitives. In return, Tony began working, not just on Kira's ship, a battered YT-1300 light freighter that had seen better decades, but on developing a reputation. He repaired targeting systems for smugglers, upgraded shield generators for merchants, built custom tools for mechanics who needed something that didn't exist in standard catalogs. And word spread. The human in the strange armor who could do impossible things with technology, who understood principles that no one else in the sector had seen before, who charged fair prices and didn't ask where your credits came from. Tony's workshop became a hub, drawing a steady stream of clients. It wasn't glamorous work, no world saving, no fighting aliens alongside gods, but it was honest in its own way. And it generated the credits they desperately needed. But Tony never forgot his real goal. Every client who came through, he asked questions about dimensional physics, about the Force, about anything or anyone who might understand how to bridge universes. Most knew nothing, but occasionally, someone would mention legends. Stories of ancient Sith who could tear holes in reality. Jedi who could perceive across vast distances. Beings called the Ones who existed outside normal space-time. Myths. Probably. But myths had to start somewhere. 2 weeks after arriving on Ord Mantell, Tony was working late in his workshop when Rask burst through the door, his vocabulator clicking frantically. Mr. Stark, we have a problem. Tony looked up from the repulsor array he'd been calibrating. What kind of problem? A ship just landed in the sector. No transponder codes, military-grade shields, and someone is asking about you by name. Tony's hands moved automatically, activating his armor's full combat configuration. Republic or Separatist? Neither. The ship's design doesn't match any database I can access. And Mr. Stark. Rask's photoreceptors dimmed with something that might have been fear. The person asking about you. They said they have information about Earth. Tony froze, the arc reactor in his chest suddenly feeling very heavy. What? They know about Earth. They said they know where you're from, and they want to meet with you. Alone. It could be a trap. Probably was a trap. But if there was even a chance, even the smallest possibility that someone knew how to get him home, Tony sealed his helmet and checked his weapon systems. Where? The old starport. Landing pad 7. They're waiting. Tony looked at Rask and the others, seeing their concern, their fear for him. If I'm not back in 2 hours, take the rusted comet and run. Get as far from here as possible. Mr. Stark. That's an order. Tony activated his repulsors and flew out into the Ord Mantell night. The industrial sector sprawling below him in patterns of light and shadow. Landing pad 7 was visible in the distance, and on it, silhouetted against the city lights, stood a figure in flowing robes. As Tony approached, he realized the figure wasn't human. Tall, impossibly thin, with skin that seemed to shift colors in the dim light, and around them, the air itself seemed to bend, reality warping in subtle ways that made Tony's sensors scream warnings. The figure turned as Tony landed, and when they spoke, their voice was layered with harmonics that didn't quite match lip movements. Anthony Stark, the Traveler. I have been searching for you across many possibilities. Tony's hand hovered near his repulsor controls. Who are you? I am known by many names. But you may call me the Architect, and yes, I know of Earth. I know of your dimensional displacement, and I know why you can never return home. Tony's world tilted. What? The rift that brought you here was not random. It was created by someone who wants something from you, Anthony Stark. Something that could change the fate of this galaxy. The Architect raised one elongated hand, and holographic images flickered to life images of Earth, of dimensional rifts, and at the center of it all, a symbol Tony didn't recognize, but that made his arc reactor pulse with sudden, impossible resonance. Come with me, the Architect said, and I will show you why you were brought to this galaxy, and what you must do to earn your way home. Tony stood on that landing pad, his armor's sensors analyzing the being before him while his mind raced through the implications. Everything about the Architect screamed danger, the reality distortions, the impossible knowledge, the perfectly timed appearance. Every instinct told him this was a manipulation. But they knew about Earth. They knew details no one in this galaxy should know. Start talking, Tony said, keeping his repulsors charged. And make it convincing, because right now I'm debating whether to blast you or just fly away. The Architect's form rippled, colors shifting across their skin like oil on water. Your skepticism is wise. But consider if I meant you harm. Would I approach openly? Would I give you time to prepare defenses? They gestured to the holographic images still floating between them. I am not your enemy, Anthony Stark. I am merely a guide, one who understands the currents of fate better than most. Fate. Right. Tony's voice dripped sarcasm. Let me guess. I'm destined for some great purpose, chosen by the universe, the only one who can save the galaxy? I've heard this pitch before. Usually from people trying to manipulate me. Not destined, displaced. There is a difference. The Architect manipulated the hologram, and Tony watched as the image of Earth flickered and changed. Your dimension and this one exist in parallel streams. Normally, they never touch. But someone created a bridge temporarily, catastrophically. You were caught in the backlash. Who? Who would have the technology to create dimensional rifts? Not technology, the Force. The Architect's layered voice took on a grave tone. There are beings in this galaxy who have learned to manipulate reality itself through their connection to the Force. Ancient techniques, forbidden for good reason. Someone used such a technique, and you were pulled through. Tony's mind cataloged possibilities. Count Dooku, or that Sidious I keep hearing about. The Sith, perhaps. Or perhaps someone else entirely. The Force works in mysterious ways, and those who wield it darkest keep the deepest secrets. The Architect closed the holographic display, but the method matters less than the result. You are here. And your technology, your understanding of physics that this galaxy has never seen makes you valuable beyond measure. So what do you want from me? Nothing. I merely offer information and a warning. The architect's form solidified slightly, becoming more defined. You have already attracted attention from powers you do not fully understand. The Techno Union saw you as a tool. Count Dooku sees you as a potential asset. But there are others beings who operate in shadows, who have felt your arrival like a discordant note in the Force's melody. Like who? The Emperor. The word hung in the air like a thunderclap. Tony's threat assessment system spiked. Ord Mantell isn't under Republic control, Tony said carefully. I should be safe from... You misunderstand. The architect's colors shifted to darker hues. The Emperor is not yet revealed. He hides behind the face of the Republic's Chancellor, Palpatine. He orchestrates this war from both sides, Jedi and Sith, Republic and Separatist. And he has felt your presence a gap in his visions, something he cannot predict or control. Tony's engineer brain rebelled against the concept, but he'd seen too much impossible physics in this galaxy to dismiss it outright. If this Emperor is so powerful, why hasn't he come for me already? Because he is patient. Because he has many plans in motion. And you are merely one variable among thousands. But make no mistake, he will come for you eventually. Or he will send those who serve him in secret. The architect leaned closer. The rift that brought you here is still present in the dimensional fabric. Faint, perhaps, but present. With the right knowledge and sufficient power, you could potentially reopen it. Tony's heart hammered against his ribs. You're saying I can get home. I'm saying it is possible. Not simple, not easy, but possible. You would need to understand the Force, not wield it, for that is beyond your biology, but understand its fundamental nature. You would need resources beyond what this criminal haven can provide, and you would need protection from those who would use you for their own ends. And you're offering that protection? No, I am offering perspective. The architect straightened. I exist outside the traditional power structures of this galaxy. I observe. Occasionally, I intervene when I believe the timeline requires adjustment. Your presence here is such an intervention unplanned by me, but significant nonetheless. Tony studied the being, trying to read intent in their shifting features. You still haven't told me what you actually want. I want you to make a choice with full awareness of consequences. The architect's hand moved, and a small data chip materialized, literal materialization. Matter from nothing, which made Tony's physics degree weep. This contains information, locations of ancient Force nexuses, names of scholars who study dimensional theory, and coordinates for a place where you might find someone who understands the bridge between technology and the Force. Tony reached out slowly, his gauntleted hand closing around the chip. It felt solid, real, despite its impossible origin. Why help me? Because I am curious. The architect's colors brightened slightly, what might have been amusement. You are an anomaly, Anthony Stark. Your technology works by principles this galaxy has never seen. Your presence disrupts visions and prophecies. You are interesting, and I wish to see what you will become in this universe. Before Tony could respond, the architect began to fade, their form becoming translucent. Wait, I have more questions. And you will find your own answers. That is the only way you will truly understand. The architect's voice came from everywhere and nowhere. But know this, the Clone Wars approach their conclusion. When they end, the galaxy will change in ways few can imagine. If you wish to survive that change, if you wish to find your way home, you must decide who you are in this universe. Tool, weapon, hero, or something else entirely. Then the architect was gone, leaving Tony alone on the landing pad with a data chip and more questions than answers. Tony stood there for a long moment, the city lights of Ord Mantell spreading below him like a circuit board. Before flying back to the workshop, Rask was waiting anxiously, along with Kira and the other technicians. They all looked up as Tony entered, questions written in every gesture. So, Kira asked, who was it? What did they want? Tony held up the data chip. Information and complications. He moved to the workshop's computer terminal, inserting the chip and beginning to decrypt its contents. Rask, pull up everything we have on Force nexuses and dimensional theory. Kira, I need you to find me the best ship in this sector not to buy. just to know what's available. Fast, armed, and capable of long-range travel. You're planning to leave Ord Mantell? Rask's vocabulator registered concern. Eventually, this place was always temporary. Tony pulled up the data chip's contents, and his eyes widened. Coordinates, schematics, historical records of force phenomena that bent physics, names, scholars, hermits, retired Jedi who'd studied aspects of the Force the Council had forbidden. But first, I need to build something. Something that'll level the playing field. Build what? Kira asked. Tony smiled, and it was the first genuine smile he'd felt since arriving in this galaxy. Kira, meet your new business partner. We're going to corner a market that doesn't exist yet. I'm going to start making technology that bridges the gap between your galaxy's physics and mine. Weapons, shields, engines, all using principles that'll make conventional systems look like toys. That'll make you even more of a target, Rask warned. Good. Let them come. Tony brought up schematics on the holographic display, already designing. I spent weeks being someone's prisoner, someone's tool. That's done. From now on, I'm playing by my rules. And my first rule is, I don't stay hidden. I build. I innovate. And I make myself too valuable to eliminate and too dangerous to control. Over the following weeks, Tony threw himself into work with manic intensity. Using the data from the architect's chip, he began developing technology that deliberately mixed this galaxy's principles with his own. Shields that used quantum instability as a feature instead of a bug. Repulsor systems that channeled energy through patterns that resonated with force-sensitive materials. Weapons that operated on frequencies that conventional defenses couldn't predict. Word spread quickly. The stranger who could make impossible technology. Smugglers wanted his engines. Pirates wanted his weapons. Even legitimate merchants began approaching, offering contracts for defensive systems. Tony accepted select jobs, built a reputation, and accumulated credits. But more importantly, he accumulated information. Every client brought news of the war, of Jedi movements, of Separatist operations. Tony mapped it all, building a picture of the galaxy's power structure, and he began to understand something crucial. This war was a distraction. Something larger was happening beneath the surface. The architect had mentioned an emperor hiding behind the chancellor. That meant the Republic itself was compromised at the highest level. 3 months after arriving on Ord Mantell, Tony's workshop had transformed from a makeshift refuge into a legitimate operation. He'd hired additional technicians, not just Skakoans, but specialists from various species, all of them grateful for work that didn't ask about their past. Kira had become his business manager, handling contracts and keeping the more aggressive clients at arm's length. Rask had evolved into his chief engineer, coordinating the workshop's various projects. They'd even bought proper premises, a converted factory with security systems that incorporated Tony's hybrid technology. It wasn't Stark Tower, but it was home. Then, on an unremarkable evening while Tony was working on a new repulsor design, Rask rushed into the workshop with his vocabulator clicking urgently. Mr. Stark, a ship just entered orbit. Military configuration. It's broadcasting a direct message for you specifically. Tony looked up from his work, tension coiling in his shoulders. Republic or Separatist? Neither. The transponder codes are Mandalorian. That was unexpected. Tony had heard of Mandalorian's warrior culture, legendary armor. No particular allegiance in the Clone Wars. What do they want? They say they have a proposition. They claim to represent someone interested in your unique capabilities. Someone who wants to offer you something the Republic and Separatists cannot. Which is freedom, true independence, and resources to pursue your research without interference. Tony's hands stilled on the holographic interface. This could be another trap, another faction trying to claim him. But the Mandalorians had a reputation for honor, for keeping their word when they gave it. And if he was going to find his way home, he needed allies. Real allies, not manipulators and opportunists. Tell them I'll meet. Neutral ground, public place, and I'm coming armed. Mr. Stark, I know the risks, Rask, but we can't stay hidden forever. Eventually, we have to take chances. Tony sealed his armor, feeling the familiar weight settle over him. Besides, I'm curious. What could Mandalorians possibly offer that I'd want? The meeting location was a cantina in Ord Mantell's neutral sector, well-lit, well-populated, the kind of place where starting a fight would bring immediate attention from multiple factions. Smart choice. Tony entered with his helmet sealed, sensors active, every system primed for combat. The Mandalorian was easy to spot, full Beskar armor in dark colors, T-visor reflecting the cantina's lights, carrying enough visible weapons to start a small war. They sat at a corner booth, and when Tony approached, the Mandalorian gestured to the seat across from them. Anthony Stark, the Traveler. The voice was filtered through the helmet, gender indeterminate. I am Rain Vizsla. I represent a coalition of clans interested in maintaining neutrality in this war. We've been watching your work. Everyone seems to be watching my work, Tony replied, sitting but keeping his body language ready to move. What makes you different? We want to hire you. Not own you, hire you. Temporary contract, generous payment, complete autonomy over your methods. Rain slid a datapad across the table. We need someone who can upgrade our defensive systems. Someone whose technology the Republic and Separatists can't easily counter. You're uniquely qualified. Tony scanned the datapad. The offer was generous, almost too generous. What's the catch? The catch is that working for Mandalorians makes you a target for anyone who wants to keep Mandalore weak, and there are many who benefit from our neutrality remaining passive. Rain leaned back. But in exchange, you get access to our networks, our resources, and our protection. The Mandalorian clans honor their contracts. If we say you're under our protection, the galaxy knows that means something. Tony considered. It was risky. But the architect had been right, he couldn't hide forever. Eventually, he needed to engage with the galaxy's power structures on his own terms. And Mandalorians, for all their violent reputation, had one thing the Republic and Separatists lacked. They kept their word. I want final approval on any technology I create for you, Tony said. And I want access to your historical archives. Anything relating to ancient technologies or force phenomena. Rain's helmet tilted slightly. Agreed. When can you begin? Tony smiled behind his helmet. As soon as you show me to your workshop. As Tony left the cantina with Rain, heading toward the Mandalorian ship waiting at the starport, he felt something shift. He was no longer running, no longer just surviving. He was building something, a reputation, a network, maybe even a path home. The Clone Wars raged across the galaxy. Jedi and Sith played their games. Republic and Separatists ground each other into dust. But Tony Stark was learning to navigate it all, using his unique advantages to carve out his own space. He thought of the architect's words, "Decide who you are in this universe." Tony still didn't have a full answer, but he was beginning to understand that maybe, just maybe, he could be something this galaxy had never seen before. Not a Jedi, not a Sith, not Republic or Separatist. Something new, something that played by different rules. Iron Man in a galaxy far, far away. And the story was just beginning. Word count, 798. Conclusion. Tony Stark's journey through the Clone Wars had transformed him from prisoner to player. The arc reactor in his chest, that symbol of his genius and survival, now hummed in harmony with a galaxy it was never designed for. He'd escaped the Techno Union's control, survived encounters with both Jedi and Sith, and established himself as an independent force in a universe defined by ancient conflicts. The hybrid technology he'd created, Earth innovation fused with Separatist engineering, gave him an edge that neither Republic nor Separatists could easily counter. His partnership with the Mandalorians offered protection and resources, while his growing network on Ord Mantell provided information and opportunities. But the path home remained uncertain. The architect's data chip held promises of knowledge, hints of dimensional theory that might bridge the gap between universes. Yet Tony understood that returning to Earth, if it was even possible, would require understanding the Force itself. That mystical energy he couldn't wield but desperately needed to comprehend. The Clone Wars ground on, each battle bringing the galaxy closer to some unknown transformation. Tony could feel it in the currents of information flowing through his network. Something was building. Some catastrophic change that the architect had warned about. When it came, Tony would need to be ready. For now, he built. He innovated. He survived. And somewhere in the back of his mind, he held on to hope that the genius that had saved him so many times before would eventually show him the way home. The galaxy had gained something unprecedented. A hero from another reality, playing by rules it had never encountered. And whether that would save it or doom it remained to be seen. Is greater than is greater than is greater than. May the Force be with you. More stories await.